They believed pain was the ultimate weapon. Across 1,000 conquered worlds, the Empire had broken every species the same way. Not with bombs, not with fleets, but with suffering, pain compliance, pain obedience, pain surrender. And then they captured a human. What followed was the first mistake that would end an empire. The Galactic Empire ruled thousands of worlds and believed they understood every species in the universe. They studied biology, measured strength, calculated intelligence, and most importantly, tested pain limits. For them, conquest was science. Before invading any planet, they created a detailed report that included muscle power, bone density, reaction speed, emotional control, and pain tolerance. In their long history of expansion, pain had always been the fastest and most effective way to control others. Every species broke at a certain level. Some screamed at the first sign of nerve shock. Some begged when their senses were overloaded. Others simply shut down completely. The Empire had never failed in this method. When they discovered humans, they followed the same process. Earth was attacked with precise orbital strikes, and the Empire expected quick surrender. Humans were physically smaller than many warrior species. Their bones were not the strongest. Their skin was thin compared to armored races. Their nervous system showed high pain response in early scans. All the data suggested that humans were fragile and emotionally unstable. So when Earth defense fleets were destroyed and cities burned under alien fire, the Empire assumed the war was already won. But something unexpected happened. Humans kept fighting, even after losing major battles, even after heavy damage to their cities, even when survival chances were low. That confused the Empire, but it did not create fear. They believed it was simply delayed collapse, a temporary reaction before surrender. During Earth's final evacuation attempt, one human ship was captured. Inside was Commander Elias Ward. He was not the largest soldier, not the strongest, and not genetically enhanced. But he was calm, unusually calm. The Empire transported him to a high-security research station under the official purpose of biological study, though the real objective was pain evaluation. They assigned him a number, Subject H-27, and removed his name from formal records because names create identity, and identity creates empathy. The Empire preferred subjects without identity. Inside a white metal chamber, Elias was secured to a vertical support frame with energy cuffs locking his wrists and ankles. Medical scanners surrounded him, analyzing every heartbeat and neural signal. Alien scientists observed from behind reinforced glass, while the facility overseer stood at the center of the observation room, tall, thin, and emotionless. He looked at the human not with hatred, but with scientific curiosity. "Begin Phase 1, he ordered calmly. Elias slowly lifted his head. His face showed bruises from capture and dried blood near his eyebrow, but his eyes were steady and focused directly on the observation window. He showed no panic. The initial scans displayed elevated heart rate, but stable rhythm, controlled stress response, and high muscle tension. One scientist quietly noted the subject awareness without visible fear. The overseer remained unmoved and stated that all species panic eventually. The chamber lights dimmed as energy nodes activated along the walls, producing a low mechanical hum that filled the room. Elias closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. He did not ask questions. He did not beg. He did not shout. That silence unsettled the observers more than screaming would have. Most species demanded answers or mercy immediately. This human simply waited, watching, calculating. The overseer leaned slightly forward and spoke in a low voice, saying that pain reveals truth and that they would soon see his. Outside the station, space drifted in silence, while fragments of Earth destroyed fleet floated in darkness. To the Empire, this was routine procedure, another species processed, another world categorized. But they were wrong about one critical detail. Humans did not see pain as the end of resistance. For them, pain was something older and deeply familiar, something survived again and again through history filled with war, disease, disasters, and conflict among themselves. And in that cold chamber, While machines prepare to measure his limits and alien scientists prepare to record another predictable collapse, Commander Elias Ward was not thinking about surrender. He was thinking about time, about endurance, and about how long he needed to hold on. The Empire believed they were about to discover the limits of human pain, but in reality, they were about to discover something far more dangerous: the human ability to endure beyond expectation. Inside the observation room, the Overseer studied the data streaming across multiple holographic screens while technicians adjusted calibration level for the first pain cycle. The Empire's pain amplification system was not primitive torture. It was advanced neurological manipulation designed to stimulate specific nerve pathways without causing immediate death. The goal was controlled suffering, precise measurement, and predictable breaking points. They had refined this technology over centuries of conquest. Elias' breathing remained steady as baseline readings were recorded. The system mapped his neural network, identifying major pain receptors and stress centers in the brain. One technician commented that human neural structures were highly reactive compared to other species, which should make the process efficient. The Overseer responded that efficiency was expected. Phase 1 activation began at a low percentage, just enough to test reaction. A pulse of invisible energy flowed through the chamber, targeting peripheral nerves. Elias' muscles tightened instantly, and a sharp spike appeared on the neural monitor. His heart rate increased, but he did not cry out. Instead, he inhaled slowly through his nose and exhaled through his mouth, controlling his breathing as if trained for this exact moment. Scientists exchanged quiet looks. Most species vocalized immediately under even minimal stimulation. The system increased slightly, sending controlled waves of pain through muscle tissue and joints, simulating the sensation of fractures without actual structural damage. Sweat formed along Elias' forehead, and his fingers curled against the energy restraints, but he maintained eye contact with the observation window. The Overseer watched closely, waiting for the first sign of panic or plea for mercy. None came. Instead, Elias whispered something too soft for external microphones to capture clearly. Audio enhancement picked up fragments of words about endurance and duty. This unexpected composure caused minor debate among the analysts. Some suggested that humans might possess psychological resistance patterns not previously documented. Others insisted it was temporary shock delay. The Overseer ended discussion and ordered continuation. Outside the chamber, the research station orbited silently, shielded by defensive satellites. To the Empire, this was simply data collection that would improve future conquests. To Elias, every second was part of a larger calculation. Unknown to the observers, the human mind was not only enduring the pain, but organizing it, placing each wave into mental compartments learned through military conditioning and survival training. The Empire believed they were testing limits. They did not realize they were establishing the beginning of their own regret. The Empire believed that if the body did not break easily, the mind would. Across thousands of conquered species, psychological collapse had always come faster than physical failure. Memories, fear, isolation, and hopelessness were stronger weapons than nerve stimulation. Inside the chamber, the pain level was temporarily reduced, not as mercy, but as strategy. Scientists adjusted the neural interface device that surrounded Elias' head. Thin strands of energy connected to specific areas of his brain, targeting memory centers and emotional triggers. The Overseer gave a simple order: initiate cognitive pressure. Instantly, images flooded Elias' mind. He saw Earth from orbit, cities burning under alien fire. He saw human ships exploding in silence. He heard voices of civilians screaming for evacuation. The projections were not random. They were carefully constructed simulations based on data collected during the invasion. The goal was simple: make him believe humanity was finished. His heart rate spiked sharply. Brain activity surged. His breathing became heavier for a moment. A scientist quietly said, "Emotional distress confirmed." The Overseer watched closely, expecting tears, rage, or desperation. But something unexpected happened. Elias closed his eyes and steadied his breathing again. The images continued. Now they showed soldiers he had commanded, friends lost in previous battles, memories of funerals, moments of personal failure. The system forced him to relive his worst experiences in perfect clarity. Many species collapsed under this phase. The mind, when overloaded with trauma, usually seeks escape through surrender. But Elias did not beg for it to stop. Instead, a faint sound escaped his mouth. At first, the observers thought it was pain. Then they realized he was laughing softly. The overseer frowned. "Increase emotional amplification," he ordered. The system intensified, adding layers of sensory detail. Smoke filled his simulated lungs. Heat burned his skin. The screams grew louder. Still, he did not break. Finally, Elias spoke clearly despite the neural pressure. "You don't understand us." His voice was strained but steady. The overseer signaled for audio enhancement. "Clarify statement," he demanded. Elias opened his eyes, staring through the illusion as if he could see the observers beyond it. "You think pain and loss are new to us," he said. "They're not." Data analysts scanned his brain waves and noticed something unusual. Instead of chaotic patterns typical of trauma response, his neural activity began stabilizing. He was not resisting the memories. He was accepting them. Humans had a long history of suffering long before the Empire arrived. Wars between nations, natural disasters, disease outbreaks, personal tragedies. Pain was already part of their collective identity. The psychological attack that had shattered countless alien civilizations was, for a human, something familiar. The system attempted deeper intrusion, forcing him to experience guilt, responsibility, and imagine failure scenarios where his decisions led to total extinction. His pulse trembled at dangerous levels for a brief moment. Then it slowed again. He whispered something under his breath. "Pain is temporary. Purpose is permanent." One scientist stepped back from the console. "Subject is adapting," she said quietly. The overseer dismissed the concern. "No mind adapts indefinitely." He ordered the next escalation. Energy output increased, blending physical pain with mental pressure simultaneously. The chamber vibrated slightly as systems worked harder. Elias' body shook under combined stress, veins visible under his skin. Sweat covered his face, yet his eyes remained focused and aware. The Empire believed psychological destruction was inevitable. They did not realize they were witnessing a species that had evolved not in comfort, but in constant struggle. Each traumatic memory was not weakening him. It was reminding him why he had to endure. And for the first time since the testing began, uncertainty entered the observation room. The Empire believed that if the body did not break easily, the mind would. Across thousands of conquered species, psychological collapse had always come faster than physical failure. Memories, fear, isolation, and hopelessness were stronger weapons than nerve stimulation. Inside the chamber, the pain level was temporarily reduced, not as mercy, but as strategy. Scientists adjusted the neural interface device that surrounded Elias' head. Thin strands of energy connected to specific areas of his brain, targeting memory centers and emotional triggers. The overseer gave a simple order: initiate cognitive pressure. Instantly, images flooded Elias' mind. He saw Earth from orbit, cities burning under alien fire. He saw human ships exploding in silence. He heard voices of civilians screaming for evacuation. The projections were not random. They were carefully constructed simulations based on data collected during the invasion. The goal was simple: make him believe humanity was finished. His heart rate spiked sharply. Brain activity surged. His breathing became heavier for a moment. A scientist quietly said, "Emotional distress confirmed." The overseer watched closely, expecting tears, rage, or desperation. But something unexpected happened. Elias closed his eyes and steadied his breathing again. The images continued. Now they showed soldiers he had commanded, friends lost in previous battles, memories of funerals, moments of personal failure. The system forced him to relive his worst experiences in perfect clarity. Many species collapsed under this phase. The mind, when overloaded with trauma, usually seeks escape through surrender. But Elias did not beg for it to stop. Instead, a faint sound escaped his mouth. At first, the observers thought it was pain. Then they realized he was laughing softly. The overseer frowned. "Increase emotional amplification," he ordered. The system intensified, adding layers of sensory detail. Smoke filled his simulated lungs. Heat burned his skin. The screams grew louder. Still, he did not break. Finally, Elias spoke, clearly despite the neural pressure. "You don't understand us." His voice was strained but steady. The overseer signaled for audio enhancement. "Clarify statement," he demanded. Elias opened his eyes, staring through the illusion as if he could see the observers beyond it. "You think pain and loss are new to us," he said. "They're not." Data analysts scanned his brainwaves and noticed something unusual. Instead of chaotic patterns typical of trauma response, his neural activity began stabilizing. He was not resisting the memories. He was accepting them. Humans had a long history of suffering long before the Empire arrived. Wars between nations, natural disasters, disease outbreaks, personal tragedies. Pain was already part of their collective identity. The psychological attack that had shattered countless alien civilizations was, for a human, something familiar. The system attempted deeper intrusion, forcing him to experience guilt, responsibility, and imagined failure scenarios where his decisions led to total extinction. His pulse trembled at dangerous levels for a brief moment. Then it slowed again. He whispered something under his breath. "Pain is temporary. Purpose is permanent." One scientist stepped back from the console. "Subject is adapting," she said quietly. The overseer dismissed the concern. "No mind adapts indefinitely." He ordered the next escalation. Energy output increased, blending physical pain with mental pressure simultaneously. The chamber vibrated slightly as systems worked harder. Elias' body shook under combined stress, veins visible under his skin. Sweat covered his face, yet his eyes remained focused and aware. The Empire believed psychological destruction was inevitable. They did not realize they were witnessing a species that had evolved not in comfort, but in constant struggle. Each traumatic memory was not weakening him. It was reminding him why he had to endure. And for the first time since the testing began, uncertainty entered the observation room. The chamber temperature began to rise as energy systems worked beyond standard testing levels. Engineers warned that continuous output above 70% could damage internal circuits, but the overseer ignored the caution. He was no longer simply collecting data. This had become a matter of authority. The Empire could not allow one captured human to challenge centuries of scientific certainty. "Stabilize the subject and prepare for further increase," he ordered. Automated medical drones injected microdoses of regenerative serum into Elias' bloodstream. The serum prevented organ failure and kept him conscious. The Empire did not want him dead. They wanted him aware, fully aware. As the drones retreated, Elias felt a brief wave of clarity. The pain had not disappeared, but it had shifted. His body was shaking, yet his thoughts were sharp. He measured time carefully in his mind. Seconds mattered. Every surge of energy sent through the chamber was being recorded by something far beyond the Empire's understanding. Deep inside his spinal column, hidden beneath layers of human tissue, was a small device implanted before the mission began. It was silent and undetectable to standard scans. The device responded to extreme electromagnetic output. The stronger the Empire pushed the pain system, the stronger the device transmitted. Outside the research station, beyond the reach of Imperial scanners, faint signals were traveling into deep space. They carried encrypted coordinates. Human survivors had not scattered blindly after Earth fell. They had regrouped. They had waited. And they were listening. Back inside the chamber, the pain level climbed again to 75%. Elias' body reacted violently. Muscles locked, and his knees nearly gave out, though the restraints held him upright. Blood dripped slowly from his fingertips where the pressure had broken skin. His vision flickered in and out. The system displayed warning signs of neural overload. A scientist spoke with clear concern. "Overseer, long-term brain damage is imminent." The overseer replied coldly, "Then we will record the damage." He believed that once the human finally broke, the Empire would gain perfect data to ensure future human compliance. What he did not know was that the chamber itself was becoming a beacon. Each spike in output created a stronger burst from a hidden implant. Far away, on the edge of former human territory, a small fleet detected the pattern. At first, it was faint like background noise. Then became clear, a rhythm, a signal tied directly to pain intensity. Human commanders recognized it immediately. It was the contingency protocol. Commander Elias Ward was alive, and he was buying time. Inside the facility, the pain reached 80%. Elias screamed again, his voice echoing through the metal walls. His heart rhythm became unstable, and his body convulsed so violently that 2 restraint bolts cracked. The scientist stepped back in fear, not of him, but of the system overload. Yet through the agony, Elias forced himself to focus. He imagined the fleet receiving the signal. He imagined ships preparing for warp jump. He imagined humanity refusing to disappear. The overseer studied the data and felt something unfamiliar rising within him. Doubt. Why does he continue? One scientist whispered. There was no logical explanation in their records. Most species fought for survival. This human seemed to endure for something larger. The pain amplification system reached its operational limit. Warning alarms filled the control room. "We must reduce output," an engineer insisted. The overseer hesitated only a moment before shaking his head. Push to maximum safe threshold. In that decision, the Empire sealed its mistake. Because while they believed they were measuring human limits, they were unknowingly sending a signal across the stars. And humanity was already on its way. The chamber vibrated as the system reached 85% power. Red warning lights flashed across every control panel. Engineers argued quietly, saying the facility had never sustained this level for so long. The overseer ignored them. His focus was fixed on the human still standing inside the energy field. Elias' body was covered in sweat and streaks of blood. His breathing was uneven now, and each inhale sounded painful. His muscles twitched without control as amplified nerve signals burned through him. At this intensity, most species lost consciousness within seconds. Some suffered permanent neurological collapse. Yet Elias remained awake. The medical drones circled again, injecting stabilizers to prevent organ shutdown. The Empire wanted a breaking point, not a corpse. Increased to 90%, the overseer said quietly. The room fell silent. No one argued this time, but fear was visible on every face. The system obeyed. The surge that followed was like a silent explosion inside the chamber. Elias' scream tore through the air, raw and powerful. His body lifted against the restraints as every nerve fired at once. His heart rate shot to critical levels. Blood vessels ruptured under his skin, creating dark patterns across his arms and chest. The neural monitors displayed chaotic spikes. For a brief moment, it appeared his brain might shut down completely. The overseer leaned forward, certain this was the end. "Prepare compliance recording," he ordered. But instead of collapsing, Elias' body slowly lowered back against the support frame. His breathing was ragged, but he was still conscious. Through blurred vision, he looked toward the observation window again. The scientists expected pleading. They expected surrender. What they saw instead unsettled them deeply. Elias was smiling. It was small and weak, but it was unmistakable. "Why?" one scientist whispered under breath. The overseer felt irritation rising. "He is at biological maximum," an analyst reported. 90% output exceeds predicted tolerance by 42%. The numbers made no sense. The Empire's models had never been wrong before. Inside the chamber, Elias could barely feel his limbs anymore. The pain had passed beyond sharp sensation into something distant and overwhelming. But in that distance, he found clarity. He remembered training sessions designed to simulate extreme capture scenarios. He remembered instructors saying that pain can become background noise if the mind refuses to give it control. He focused again on time. The implant inside his spine pulsed stronger with every surge. Far away, human ships were accelerating toward the signal. He only needed to endure a little longer. Increased to 95%, the overseer demanded, now driven more by pride than science. The engineers hesitated, then complied. The chamber shook violently as power flooded the amplifiers. Elias' body convulsed again, and one of the restraints snapped completely, though the energy field still held him upright. Alarms screamed throughout the facility. Structural integrity failing, an engineer warned. At that exact moment, a new alert appeared on the main display. External sensors detected unidentified vessels exiting warp near the station's perimeter. The control room froze. Multiple contacts, a technician reported, voice shaking. Configuration matches human fleet signatures. The overseer's confidence vanished. He turned back toward the chamber, realizing too late what had happened. The torture system had created a signal powerful enough to be tracked. Elias forced his head up one last time. Blood ran down his chin, but his eyes were steady. In a broken yet clear voice, he said, "You tested our limits. Now we test yours." Outside the station, human warships powered their weapons. The Empire had believed pain was their greatest tool. They never imagined it could become a beacon calling their enemy home. Panic spread through the control room as more sensor reports appeared on the screens. Human ships were not just approaching. They were already in attack formation. At least 20 confirmed vessels had exited warp around the research station, and more signals were appearing every second. The Empire had never expected a rescue attempt so deep inside controlled space. "Activate defense grid," the overseer shouted. Automated turrets rotated into position outside the station. Shield generators powered up, forming a protective barrier around the structure. But the sudden energy demand overloaded systems that were already strained from the pain chamber. Engineers struggled to balance power between shields and internal containment fields. Inside the chamber, the amplification system was still locked at 95%. It had not yet powered down. Elias' body trembled violently, but he sensed the shift in the station's energy. Even through the overwhelming pain, he felt vibrations from distant impacts. The first human strike came without warning. A concentrated blast from a cruiser pierced the outer defense satellites, destroying 2 instantly. Explosions lit up space around the station. In the control room, alarms screamed from every direction. "Shields at 80%, a technician yelled. "Enemy targeting main reactor arrays." The overseer's comm authority began to crack. He realized too late that the torture chamber's power output had created a detectable energy pattern across space. The Empire's greatest tool had betrayed them. Another blast shook the station harder this time. Debris collided with the outer hull. Lights flickered. Sparks fell from ceiling panels. Inside the chamber, containment stabilizers failed for a fraction of a second. The energy field surrounding Elias fluctuated wildly. Pain signals spiked beyond safe limits. He let out one final cry as the system overloaded. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of channeling pain into Elias, the unstable system redirected energy back through its control circuits. In the observation room, a surge of amplified neural feedback erupted through the command consoles. The overseer was closest to the interface. He had insisted on manual override control. When the surge hit, it struck him directly through the neural relay he used to monitor Elias' pain readings. For less than a second, he experienced the same 95% intensity that Elias had endured for minutes. He collapsed instantly, his body unable to process even a fraction of the overload. Other scientists screamed and scattered as control panels exploded around them. The pain chamber shut down completely, leaving Elias hanging against broken restraints in sudden silence. Emergency lights switched on, casting the room in deep red shadows. Outside, human warships breached the station's weakened shields. Boarding pods launched toward the hull. Within minutes, armored human soldiers forced entry through shattered corridors. Gunfire echoed through metallic hallways as Imperial guards attempted resistance. But they were unprepared for coordinated assault at this scale. Inside the ruined chamber, smoke filled the air. Elias slowly fell to one knee as the last restraint released. His body felt heavy and distant, but he was alive. Footsteps approached rapidly. A human soldier in combat armor entered the room, weapon raised. When he saw Elias, he rushed forward. "Commander Ward," the soldier said urgently, lowering his weapon. "Extraction team is here." Elias tried to stand but stumbled. Two soldiers supported him. Through cracked glass, he saw the control room in chaos and the overseer lying motionless. He managed a weak smile despite everything. "They turned it up, didn't they?" he asked quietly. The soldier nodded. "Yes, sir, they did." Elias looked around at the destroyed facility and the fallen alien officers. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried certainty. "Good," he said. Outside, the Empire's once proud research station burned against the darkness of space. Across the galaxy, reports would soon spread about the incident. The Empire had believed pain was control. They believed suffering guaranteed obedience. Instead, they had awakened a response they could not contain. They had tested human pain limits, and they had deeply, permanently regretted it. The research station burned in silence as human warships secured the surrounding space. Small explosions continued to flash along the damaged hull, while emergency shuttles attempted to flee. None escaped. Human pilots disabled engines with precise shots, leaving the remaining Imperial crew drifting helplessly. Inside the station, boarding teams moved room by room, shutting down weapons and capturing surviving officers. The Empire had always believed itself untouchable within its own territory. Now, deep inside their controlled sector, one of their most advanced facilities had fallen in less than 30 minutes. In the ruined pain chamber, medics carefully placed Commander Elias Ward onto a stabilization stretcher. His vital signs were weak but steady. Regenerative patches sealed broken blood vessels under his skin. Oxygen support eased his breathing. Despite the extreme trauma, his neural patterns were stable. One medic looked at the readings in disbelief. "No permanent cognitive collapse," she said quietly. Another replied. "He held longer than projected human maximum." Elias opened his eyes slightly as they carried him through the corridor. Smoke drifted through damaged ceiling panels, and sparks flickered from broken wiring. Human soldiers saluted him as he passed. He tried to speak, but could only manage a whisper. "Signal confirmed?" The squad leader walking beside him nodded. "Yes, sir. The beacon worked perfectly. Fleet received full coordinates." Elias closed his eyes again, relieved. The mission had never been survival. It had been proof. Proof that the Empire could be reached. Proof that their systems were not perfect. Proof that humans would not simply disappear. Outside, the lead human flagship transmitted a secure message across open frequencies. It was not encrypted. It was not hidden. It was meant to be heard. The message was short and direct. To the Galactic Empire, you tested human pain limits. You failed. Do not repeat this mistake. Across nearby systems, listening posts captured the transmission. News of the destroyed facility spread quickly. The Empire attempted to contain the information, but too many signals had escaped. Independent worlds heard the story. Conquered species heard it too. For the first time in centuries, whispers of resistance began to grow. If humans could survive the Empire's ultimate weapon, perhaps the Empire was not invincible after all. Back inside the flagship medical bay, Elias lay under bright surgical lights while advanced treatment devices repaired internal damage. His body would heal over time. Humans were resilient that way. The fleet commander entered the room quietly and stood beside him. "You knew they would push to maximum," she said. Elias managed a faint smile. "I was counting on it." She nodded slowly. "The Empire is already mobilizing retaliation." Elias looked toward the viewport, where distant stars stretched across endless darkness. "Good," he replied softly. "Now they know we're still here." The Empire's leadership convened emergency councils across multiple systems. Reports from the destroyed station were analyzed in detail. Data confirmed what many found difficult to accept. The human subject endured sustained 95% amplification for a duration far beyond predictive models. The pain technology that had subdued thousands of species had failed against one individual. More troubling was the psychological factor. He had not broken. He had not surrendered. He had smiled. Fear, a rare emotion within Imperial command circles, began to spread quietly. If pain did not guarantee control over humans, then traditional domination methods might not work at all. And if humans adapted to suffering rather than collapsed under it, they represented something dangerous, something unpredictable. As the human fleet prepared to jump back into deep space, the burning station faded behind them. Elias rested, knowing recovery would be long. But the message had been delivered clearly. The Empire had measured human pain limits expecting weakness. Instead, they had discovered endurance beyond calculation. And across the galaxy, one truth began to circulate among every watching civilization. Do not test humans by their suffering, because when pushed to the edge, they do not simply survive. They respond. Days after the destruction of the research station, the shockwaves continued to spread across the galaxy. The Empire attempted to control the narrative. Official reports described the event as a minor security breach, quickly contained. They claimed the human subject had died during testing and that the facility had been destroyed by internal malfunction. But the truth moved faster than propaganda. Independent traders had recorded the battle from a distance. Listening posts had captured the open human transmission. Even some Imperial officers had secretly shared fragments of data before communications were locked down. The story could not be erased. One human had endured nearly the maximum output of the Empire's pain amplification system. One human had survived long enough to bring a fleet directly into the heart of controlled space. And one facility once considered untouchable was now drifting debris. In Imperial High Command, the atmosphere was tense. Senior officials gathered in a circular chamber filled with holographic projections of human biology and battle statistics. Explain the failure, one commander demanded. Scientists presented their findings. Human neural networks showed unusual adaptability under prolonged stress. Their endocrine systems released chemical responses that temporarily reduced perceived pain. Psychological conditioning allowed compartmentalization of trauma rather than collapse. In simple terms, humans did not respond to suffering the way other species did. Instead of breaking, they adjusted. This conclusion was deeply troubling. For centuries, pain compliance had guaranteed obedience across conquered worlds. It was the foundation of imperial rule. If humans were resistant to that foundation, then they represented more than a military threat. They represented a philosophical threat to the Empire's belief system. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship traveling through deep space, Commander Elias Ward slowly regained strength. Medical teams had stabilized him, but recovery would take time. His muscles were still damaged. His nervous system occasionally misfired with phantom pain, yet he remained mentally clear. He spent hours reviewing reports from the battle. Human losses had been minimal compared to the damage inflicted. Morale across surviving colonies had surged dramatically after the transmission spread. Worlds that had considered surrender were now reconsidering. One officer entered his recovery chamber with updated intelligence. The Empire is repositioning fleets near former Earth territory, she reported. Elias nodded slowly. They're afraid, he said. She looked surprised. Afraid? They still outnumber us. Elias looked toward the viewport where stars streaked past in warp travel. Numbers don't matter as much as doubt, he replied. We gave them doubt. On distant occupied planets, alien civilians whispered about the human who survived the impossible. Stories exaggerated details, as legends always do. Some said he endured 100% intensity. Others claimed he never screamed at all. The truth mattered less than the symbol. For the first time in generations, conquered species imagined resistance that might actually succeed. The Empire sensed this shift. Patrols increased. Surveillance tightened. Punishments became harsher, but harsher control only confirmed their fear. They were reacting, not leading. In a secure Imperial laboratory, scientists ran new simulations based on human data. Every model showed the same problem. Pain alone would not guarantee submission. Psychological pressure alone would not guarantee surrender. Humans combined physical endurance with strategic thinking. They could use suffering as bait, as signal, as weapon. That unpredictability disturbed the Empire more than any fleet. Back on the flagship, Elias finally stood unassisted for the first time since rescue. His body ached deeply, but he forced himself to walk toward the command deck. Crew members paused to watch him pass. To them, he was not just a commander. He was proof. Proof that humans could endure the Empire's worst. As he reached the central console, he addressed the bridge crew quietly. "This wasn't a victory," he said. "It was a warning. They tested our pain limits. Now, they know we don't break the way they expect." The crew listened in silence. Elias continued, voice steady despite lingering weakness. "And next time, we won't just survive. We'll push back." Across the galaxy, the Empire prepared for escalation. But something fundamental had changed. They no longer saw humans as fragile statistics in a conquest report. They saw them as an unknown variable. And in an empire built on certainty, the unknown was the most dangerous thing of all. The Empire moved quickly after the incident. War fleets were repositioned along strategic borders. Supply lines were reinforced. Intelligence divisions were ordered to gather every piece of information about human biology, culture, and military training. The official command was simple: understand the weakness that had been missed. But deep inside Imperial High Command, there was a silent understanding that this was no longer about weakness. It was about uncertainty. Humans had introduced something unpredictable into a system built on control. On occupied worlds, the reaction was immediate. Species that had lived under Imperial rule for generations began sharing the story quietly. Some had seen the open transmission from the human fleet. Others heard rumors from traders and escaped laborers. The message was simple and powerful. The Empire could be hurt. For centuries, conquered civilizations believed resistance was pointless because pain compliance always ended in surrender. Now, they had proof that at least one species could endure beyond expected limits. Small acts of rebellion started appearing across different sectors. Communication towers were sabotaged. Resource shipments were delayed. Imperial patrols faced unexpected ambushes from local populations. None of these actions alone were large threats, but together they formed a pattern. The Empire noticed the pattern quickly. Their analysts connected the unrest directly to the human incident. Psychological contamination, one official described it. The idea that suffering did not automatically mean defeat was spreading like a virus. Back aboard the human flagship, Commander Elias Ward studied holographic maps showing Imperial fleet movements. He was fully awake now, though scars remained visible along his arms and neck. His body still carried signs of the testing, but his posture was steady. Around him stood human officers representing different surviving colonies. They understood that the next phase would be more dangerous. The Empire would not allow embarrassment to stand unanswered. "They're preparing retaliation," one officer said, pointing to highlighted regions on the map. 3 major fleets are moving toward former Earth systems. Elias nodded. "They'll try to crush us quickly before the story spreads further." Another officer asked, "Do we have enough ships to hold them?" Elias paused before answering. Not in direct confrontation, he admitted honestly. "But this isn't about matching strength ship for ship." He expanded the map, showing smaller Allied signals beginning to appear. Independent worlds, once neutral, were opening communication channels with human command. Some offered supplies. Others offered safe harbor. A few even offered ships. The Empire's certainty had cracked, and through that crack new alliances were forming. "Pain was their weapon," Elias said quietly. "Now doubt is ours." In Imperial High Command, emergency councils debated new strategies. Some demanded the immediate deployment of the Empire's most destructive weapons to eliminate human territory entirely. Others warned that excessive brutality would only strengthen the growing narrative of resistance. For the first time in generations, Imperial leaders disagreed openly. The unity that once defined their dominance began to weaken under internal tension. Meanwhile, intelligence reports confirmed a disturbing fact. The human subject, Commander Elias Ward, had survived with full cognitive function. His survival symbolized failure of the Empire's most reliable system. The overseer who had conducted the test was officially declared dead due to facility malfunction. Privately, his death was considered a consequence of arrogance. The Empire began quietly revising its assessment of humanity. Humans were no longer classified as physically inferior and emotionally unstable. A new label appeared in internal files: high-risk adaptive species. It was the first time in Imperial history that a conquered civilization received such a classification. Back on the bridge of the flagship, Elias addressed his crew once more. "They believe they can still overwhelm us," he said calmly. "Maybe they can, but they've learned something they can't erase. Pain doesn't control us. It strengthens our resolve." Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly across space. Human fleets began coordinating with new allies, preparing for what would come next. The Empire still possessed massive power. They still controlled thousands of systems. But the foundation of that control had shifted. Fear was no longer one-sided. The Empire had tested human pain limits, expecting obedience. Instead, they had awakened resistance, not just in one species but across the galaxy. And that shift in belief was far more dangerous than any fleet. The human fleet did not celebrate after the rescue. They did not cheer or declare victory. They moved with discipline and silence. The destroyed research station burned behind them, slowly breaking apart into glowing debris. Commander Elias Ward stood on the bridge of the flagship, still weak but upright. His body carried scars from the chamber, but his eyes were clear and steady. The crew around him worked calmly, tracking Imperial fleet movements and monitoring communications across nearby systems. Reports were already spreading through open channels. The Empire's most feared pain facility had been destroyed. Their overseer was dead. Their ultimate weapon had failed against one human. Elias understood something important. This was not the end of the war. It was the beginning of a shift. Across the galaxy, conquered species watched carefully. For generations, they had believed resistance was useless because pain always forced surrender. The Empire had built its power on that belief. Pain was control. Pain was obedience. Pain was certainty. But now that certainty was damaged, independent worlds began sending quiet messages to human command. Some offered resources. Some offered safe travel routes. A few even offered military support. The Empire tried to silence the story, but it was too late. Too many had seen the battle. Too many had heard the transmission. The truth was simple and powerful. Humans endured the worst and struck back. Inside Imperial High Command, emergency sessions continued without rest. Senior leaders demanded answers from their scientists. How could a single human survive 95% amplification? Why had the subject not collapsed? Why had the facility not detected the beacon? The explanations were uncomfortable. Human biology showed extreme stress adaptation. Human psychology showed unusual resilience under trauma. And most disturbing of all, humans were willing to use suffering strategically. The Empire had treated pain as a weapon. Humans had turned it into a signal. That realization created fear. Not loud fear, not panic, but quiet doubt. And doubt inside an empire built on control is dangerous. On the flagship, Elias addressed his officers one final time before returning to medical care. He stood near the central display, the stars stretching endlessly behind him. His voice was steady, even if his body was not fully healed. "They tested our pain limits," he said calmly. "They believed suffering would make us small. They believed it would make us obedient." The room was silent. Every officer listened closely. Elias continued, "They were wrong. Pain does not define us. It shapes us. We survived ice ages. We survived world wars. We survived our own mistakes. And now we survive them. A quiet strength filled the bridge. Outside, human warships adjusted formation and prepared for the next phase of conflict. The Empire still had more ships, more territory, more raw power. But something fundamental had changed. For the first time, the Empire understood that humans could not be measured like other species. Their limits were not simple numbers on a screen. They were moving targets, expanding under pressure. And that unpredictability could not be controlled easily. As the fleet entered warp, leaving the destroyed station behind, Elias allowed himself a small, tired smile. The mission had cost him pain beyond imagination, but it had achieved its purpose. The Empire would think twice before ever trying to measure humanity again. They had wanted to test human pain limits. Instead, they tested human resolve. And in doing so, they discovered something far more dangerous than resistance. They discovered that humans do not break the way others expect. And that was the moment the Empire truly began to regret everything. The galaxy thought humans were fragile. They measured muscle density. They calculated bone strength. They studied nerve response. But they forgot one variable, the human will. And when the Empire tried to measure it, they learned the cost. If you believe humanity doesn't break, it adapts. Subscribe, because the galaxy is just beginning to understand us.